you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you for being here and your testimony. I also want to offer my condolences to the families. And, this is just completely unacceptable, period. No debate about that. I don't think anyone's debating that, but it's, when the men and women of our military do what less than 1% of Americans do in this country, which is raise their right hand to support and defend the Constitution and keep us safe, we got to do a better job, all of us, the Navy, the Marines, the Army, the Congress, and it's unacceptable. So, Admiral, I want you to, I'm having a hard time with this issue of kind of put us on the bridge of a modern Navy ship and talk about the redundancies, the radar, the GPSs, the physical watch. I know you're investigating this, but what does that look like? Aren't we the most advanced Navy in the history of the world? And how are these kind of redundancies in terms of basic seamanship and collisions at sea breaking down in your view? And it's not just one, sailor on the watch. There's a whole host of other things that would make sure we avoid these kind of collisions. What in your experience, first, what does that look like? And then what in your experience do you think is going wrong, where obviously there's a series of failures here in these collisions, not just one? What does that look like, and how can we better understand it?
Right. Sir, my experience is just as yours, that these catastrophes really result from the accumulation of a number of small errors that build up and line up eventually to create a sequence that results in an incident of this magnitude. To put you on the bridge of a modern destroyer, the watch team will be on the order of 10 people. About 4 of those will be officers, the officer of the deck, the junior officer of the deck, officer of the watch, conning officer. There'll be 2 lookouts. There'll be a quartermaster. And so there's plenty of people involved in this seamanship and navigation on the bridge. They're supported by a team in the Combat Information Center, which is also looking at electronic displays. They don't have windows, but they're backing them up. With respect to the technology, the equipment for all of those critical systems, navigation, steering, propulsion, we have a primary and a backup system for every one of those. So GPS is backed up by inertial navigators. We have a primary and a backup radar. For the rudders, we have 2 rudders, and each of those rudders has a primary and a backup hydraulic cylinder. And so there's a lot of redundancy built into these systems because they are so fundamental to safety. And so now you get a sense, and it goes back to Senator Donnelly's question and Senator King's point, which is how could all of that break down so catastrophically to result in a collision of this magnitude? And that's why we have to do the thorough investigation.
Let me ask another question. It comes to readiness, it comes to training. One of the things in my relatively short time here in the Senate that I've been concerned about with regard to military readiness is that this committee, this Congress, well-intentioned, puts additional training requirements, additional things that you need to address. Because we told you, and to be honest, most of those don't relate to combat readiness. Most of them don't relate to basic MOS, whether it's a surface warfare officer or a Marine infantry officer and his, duty to close with and destroy the enemy of our nation. How much of your training do you believe is being mandated by the Congress that takes you away from your basic MOS training? And if there are issues with that, we would certainly like to know about it. Mr. Secretary, can you try to address
Senator,
that?
let me address that for you.
You think it's a problem?
It definitely is a problem. Not only will you hear from my report group as to any actions done at the Senate level or need to be adjusted here in this chamber or other chambers, you're going to hear from them. We're going to address DOPMA. We're going to address the Inouye Amendment. We're going to address how Joint Chiefs task. We have given this committee an infinite reign, literally, to address everything. At the operational level, the Secretariat, the OPNAV, the CMC are all going through their instructions going, what are we focused on? We're focused on readiness and lethality. What do all our instructions support? And if we find instructions that are not focusing us on those two items, we're going to bring them to your attention if you have control of them. If we have control of them, we're going to try to adjust this. It's as I said earlier, the rucksack issue. All the best intentioned in the world, put a rock in to do a training on smoking cessation, put a rock in to do other sorts of training. No one's taking a rock out, and the rucksack's getting pretty damn heavy.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and Admiral, I'm assuming you would agree with that, but I implore you to bring those issues back to us, because there's only so many hours in a day. And the mission of the Navy, you know what that mission is, and we need to make sure our sailors are trained in the best way possible. In this rucksack issue you're talking about, as a reservist myself, in the reserves it's even worse, because there's less time in a year to train. So please bring those back. And again, my condolences to the families here. We need to fix this, and I know you're committed to doing it. It's going to be an all-hands-on-deck effort, but we cannot afford to lose any more of our nation's finest in training accidents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Just two quick ones, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. And it was really a follow-up to Senator Blumenthal's question, which was the home port versus the overseas ported versus kind of CONUS home ported ship. The statistics that were just read, I think, are pretty striking. And Admiral and Mr. Secretary, I know you're going to be looking at the specifics of these accidents and what specifically happened, but I think if you could also help address kind of the strategic elements, is there something that we should be looking at that makes the overseas ported ships that are based overseas going through different training, different deployment cycles? If you can help address that issue too, because it does seem like that's something that might be an element of this challenge. Do you agree with that?
Yes, Senator. Two things that have readily come out of this as far as I'm concerned. Mr. Pendleton hit on metrics. I'm a true believer in metrics. We have to know what we're measuring and what we're looking at. And this is a prime example of, can we get ourselves a dashboard that is very easy for quote-unquote management to look at the dashboard and have the appropriate indicators on there at any one time. This is what we need to do. We don't need to actually be having our hands and fingers into what's going on there. We have to have the first indicators on when to react and say, uh-oh, trending in the wrong position, let's address. If you look at the study that I have asked to be stood up, we are addressing the overall root causes of what's going on. The CNO is looking at tactical causes. We are going to be looking at root causes. We've asked people from BP North America to join us. They lived through the Deepwater Horizon tragedy and came out the other side with a very strong plan. We called the Maritime Academy and said, who is your poster child for maritime safety who's had an issue? And they said, speak to Crowley Marine. They had a bit of a rash. They have a great program now called Road to Zero. Called Tom Crowley. He said, you're on it. We looked at other situations that were out there. We called the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic has done 7 years of studies looking at high-pressure, team-oriented places. And what they were looking at were operating rooms where you had professionals, 7 different teams of professionals doing a lung transplant over a 7-hour period. And they degraded the whole thing, started over again, and said, how do we build for optimum outcome? And it came to such human behavior aspects as the anesthesiologist can go, need a minute here, everyone stop, I need to stabilize something, and had input and control into a situation of pressure and intensity that had one leader, but they had to actually culturally realign how they communicate with everyone. These are the kind of insights and people we're going to have working on our level to really see if we will have a plan to do corrective action.
Great, thank you.
Sir, if I could pile on, there is a real benefit to having ships forward deployed.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Don't get me wrong. I think it's actually critical that we have ships forward deployed.
And so for a number of reasons that you're aware of. What we do need to do when we forward deploy ships, though, to Mr. Pendleton's point, is we need to have a comprehensive understanding of what it takes to sustain that forward deployed force from a maintenance, training, infrastructure standpoint, people, the whole thing.
Yes, and that's just what I'm requesting. Take a look at that issue as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.